Hello everyone, I hope you're fine. This is our class about Edgar Allan Poe and the Gothic fiction and especially its characteristics. I'm going to correct the work that you had to do about the biography of Edgar Allan Poe and the characteristics of the Gothic fiction that you had to guess and deduce from the text and from the video. Edgar Allan Poe, so what you have to do is take your work that you did on Edgar Allan Poe, and then you complete your notes with what I'm going to say, if there are elements which are missing or different conclusion and topics that need to be added. Here you can see here on the right side some words that I'm going to use and that you might not be totally familiar with or you might not know how to write them. So this is a toolbox to help you. Right, so let's start. Edgar Allan Poe was born in 1809 and died in 1849, so at the age of 40 years old, so quite young. And so we can wonder if his life really leaked into his work, meaning if his life had influence on his writing. We can notice from his biography that he had a very traumatic childhood. With the desertion of his father, the death of his mother. Then he became a foster child and was welcomed into a foster family. His father died. He dropped out of university. So when he was young, he had to experience quite traumatic experiences. No, he had to experience quite traumatic events. And so later, when he was a bit older, his wife, who was his true and only and unique love, died because of a disease. So it was a tragic death that he had also to suffer from. So we can see that all his life is full of tragic losses, full of traumatic experiences, and we've got this sense of fate because it seems that death is looming over him, and we can really see that he has failed in the pursuit of his happiness. So some critics say that as he was clever and intelligent, he was extremely aware of this, and it might have influenced his writing because he was plagued with tragic memories of all the different losses and his failure to reach love and to reach happiness. So what is important is that Edgar Allan Poe is considered as an icon, an American icon of literature, so meaning that he's a symbol, he can be seen as a pioneer also, and somebody who is remembered and is still remembered today. So first, because he was extremely talented and gifted, because he wrote poems, he wrote short stories, he wrote novels. He was also an extremely harsh critic on other artists and other writers. But mostly he is remembered as the master of suspense and the father of the detective story. Indeed, he has given birth to a new genre. He is one of the first to have written detective fictions, and so as he's this kind of father and pioneer, he has invented the tradition, the codes, and the rules that you need to use if you want to write a gothic, if you want to write a detective fiction. So he has left a deep mark in the history of literature. He has made history both on the American scale, but also on the international scale, because he's remembered and studied worldwide. Some of his famous books. So here is a review or a form of collection of 3 types of works from him. So the Raven, which is a poem, a really long poem. Here you've got only an extract. The Tales of the Grotesque is a collection of short stories. And here you've got this an emblematic detective fiction, The Murders in the Rue Morgue. So this is it for Edgar Allan Poe. Now we're going to move to the characteristic of the Gothic genre. So here is a form which gathers all the characteristics of Gothic genre that I made from the text and from the video. So what I advise you to do is either to print the text, so the form, or to copy the form. So, and you need, I'm going to comment the form and add some pieces of information to make you better understand these characteristics. What you have in yellow are the new words or the key concepts which are necessary to understand the Gothic genre. So, the Gothic genre was born in the 18th and 19th century. It is still evolving, it is still alive today, and but it's necessary to understand the traditional codes to see how this genre has evolved and how the writers today or film directors today are playing with the codes to make maybe new codes or to create some form of parody of mock version of the Gothic. It was born during political, social, and religious crisis. During a crisis, people usually lose their landmarks, and they feel a sense of loss, of doubt, because the landmarks that they were used to are erased. So, and these doubts are expressed in the Gothic genre. In the book in itself, in terms of timing, you've got a juxtaposition of the past and the present. So you've got the present of the character, and sometimes you've got an eruption of the past in the present of the character. And this eruption of the past into the present creates an uneasiness of the reader and deranges and disrupts the life of the character. And this is the beginning, in a way, of the plot or the climax of the plot. In terms of characters, so what type of what typical characters can you find in a Gothic genre, in a Gothic book? So you can find obviously supernatural characters. We're going to see some examples. So characters that don't exist in reality. And then you've got powerful figures, and powerful figures at the time were patriarchal figures, and they were men from the aristocracy, from the upper class. And these characters are opposed to other characters who are more vulnerable, weak and fragile, and who are usually women in these books. So if you take your text, so in green, you can use a green highlighter. In green, you've got examples of these types of characters. So supernatural characters like specters, monsters, demons, corpses, skeletons. Then you've got characters from the patriarchal society, so the powerful men, so aristocrats and monks. And you've got the other categories of the heroines, the fainting heroines, so who are weak. And a bit later, so here you can see the evolution of the Gothic, 19th century. You've got new kind of patriarchal figures, so like the scientists, the fathers, the husbands. And you've got a new type of supernatural character, is this monstrous double. And this idea that you've got a double, a good and evil double, but this double is existing inside yourself, inside the characters. And we sometimes use the term doppelganger, which is a German term, to express this duality within a single man. sorry. So, in terms of setting, where do the stories take place? So, it usually takes place in a wild, open landscape, limitless, but at the same time totally desolate, isolated, and alienating. Alienating means that you are separated from the outer world, and you are also in echo separated from yourself. So this idea of duality. And even if these landscapes seem wide and open, they usually are imprisoning the character. And we feel this as a reader because these settings, these places are dark and bleak places. Bleak means this idea of a place which is totally inhospitable, which is totally unwelcoming, and which is empty of any human presence. So in the text, so this is what is in purple. You've got mountains, which can be seen as wild, desolate places. You've got the castle, the typical castle of the Gothic novel, and I'm sure you have seen that in films or in books, in book covers, which represent these imprisoning and bleak places. Then you've got also an echo of the castle. You've got the abbeys and the churches, and you've got the graveyards. Here the text refers also to streets and passageways, which are these very small streets, very dark, badly lit, and where you can be lost, where you can lose yourself, and where you usually find yourself totally alone. So these are examples of typical settings of a Gothic book. Then, what is the plot based on? So the plot is based on, as we said, on the eruption of the past in the present, and this eruption triggers the action, triggers the beginning or the climax of the plot. The plot is centered around this quest for power, and power can be seen in different ways. So you've got this patriarchal power and the desire to keep this power, and so men are usually looking for it, and this quest for patriarchal power is expressed through sexual power and the fact that the women are victims of the desire of the men. This power can also be interpreted in a different way. It's this idea of the power to control your inner forces, the external forces too, your inner desires, the inner threats, and this idea of controlling, of trying to control and looking for a sense of control of your own forces. But this quest of power is often and mainly always described in violent ways. Then you've got two very important key elements and key concepts in the Gothic is the uncanny and the sublime. So the uncanny can refer to a form of atmosphere which creates feelings on the reader. And this uncanny comes from a mix of two things which are not usually associated to and which are almost opposed. And this mix of two opposed elements creates the uneasiness of the reader. So you can have a mix of the new and the past. You can have a mix of the noun and the unnoun, the mix between the rational and the irrational, and a mix between what is human and not human. And since you are in a borderland, you don't know exactly where your landmarks are, so it reinforces this idea of loss, of in-betweenness. So I'll explain the sublime in